Hello and welcome to the Utility Week podcast with me, Rob Horgan, and Utility Week Editor-in-Chief James Wallin. As ever, we're going to spend the next 20 to 40 minutes going over the biggest stories of the past fortnight. But before we do, it's been a busy time, hasn't it, James? I thought we'd check in. Sort of seen you less in the last 2 weeks than I usually do.
Not complaining, I hear.
Tell our listeners what you've been up to.
Yeah, it's been good actually. After the first couple of weeks of the year, which were mainly kind of office bound, been out and about. So last week I went over to Wokingham to go to the National Energy System Operator Control Room, which was that's a long held invitation. Actually, I was first invited to go there in February of 2020. And I can't remember exactly what happened that derailed that visit, but there was some sort of upset around the world, and I couldn't go. So yeah, it's taken that long to finally get round to go, and it's a fascinating place, the control room. So it's one of these kind of, you know, NASA style things, a massive screen showing all of the generation and demand around the country. So they showed me this. I was asking about, you know, you always hear about the surge in electricity in the middle of a World Cup final where everyone goes on to turn their kettles on. And I was like, do you really see that? Like, is it visible that you can see that, or is that just a myth? And they took me to show they've got a printout of the first Andy Murray time Andy Murray won Wimbledon, and you can see it is a massive spike in demand after he actually won, where everybody went off celebratorily turning the lights on or something. I don't know what they were,
I was going to say, what were they doing at the end of it?
Well, turning the kettle on, I think.
Quite late in the day to have a cup of tea, that.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, I mean, surely you'd be cracking a beer, wouldn't you?
That's good. Maybe it's everyone opening their fridge door at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's it. But that was really interesting. And while I was there, I was chatting to Fintan Sly, the chief executive of NESO, and was who headed up the ESO bit beforehand. Just talking about all of the different challenges that he is facing, which an interview from that went into the Digital Weekly. And yeah, it was a really interesting time that I spent with him. Talking about, you know, what their priorities are for 2026, which is a lot, you know, progressing clean power, the ongoing connections reform, working on the strategic spatial energy plan, the regional energy spatial plans, of which we have, recording this on Friday, 30th of January, Friday morning, we've just had the transitional plan come through. The delightfully named TRESP has just come through, so looking forward to ploughing through all of the different elements of that. So that was a really interesting chat with Fintan. And then this week, as I speak, we had a wastewater conference. 2-day conference. That's always a great one. Really good community there. You know, lots of interesting talk about the big changes that are going on in the water sector, which we will come around to talk about in a bit, I'm sure. And what have you been up to lately, Rob?
So last week was mainly getting my head around the water white paper and the warm homes plan, but we'll save that and we'll come to that when we move to our looking at the news. And then this week was out in London on, when was it? Tuesday? God, I can't get my days worked out. Yeah, on Tuesday. Went to see National Gas Chief Executive John Butterworth, who's always a pleasure to sit down with. Quite a character, I think, and never short of an anecdote is John. Whether it's, you know, recounting time with his grandkids, or, you know, out his first day of work where he was sent as a 17-year-old round the block with 2 greyhounds and told not to come back until they were too tired out. So yeah, it was I spent an hour with him, so I'm sure that's going to make a fantastic interview, which again will go in our digital weekly at some point in February. I'm not going to tie myself down to writing it up too quickly, but it's I've almost got too much stuff to fit in there, so it's almost trying to work out what not to put in there. So it was really fascinating, both his take on, the issues of the day, security of supply, which he's really passionate about, but also just, recounting his career and how he got to that point. I think it will be a bit of a different style interview to what we traditionally do, mainly because most of our readers will know John's view on a lot of the big topics, because we've sort of, he appeared at Utility Week Forum in November, and we've sort of covered that off already. So it'll be a nice sort of more personal touch, I think, to this one.
It's nice to see the journeys that some of these people have taken, isn't it? Because I know that year before, John was kind enough to come along and talk to our Future Leaders Club about his journey, which was a fascinating discussion. And we've had quite a few other senior figures in the sector have come along and talked to that group of people who are just kind of starting out their careers in utilities. And it's fascinating where people come from. You get a lot of lifers who have gone through all sorts of different areas of the business and picked up all sorts of different skills throughout their time before becoming a chief executive or a senior director. Other people come in from other industries, bringing different perspectives, and it just highlights really the breadth of what you can do in utilities. A really interesting industry to work in.
Yeah, but one thing John said is he'd never applied for a job, which I thought was really interesting. He just taken the opportunities that have been offered him when someone's tapped him on the shoulder and said, fancy doing this. So good lesson for us all, perhaps, to embrace the opportunities that come our way. So that's what I've been up to. Shall we look at the news? There's only two places to start. Since we last met 2 weeks ago, we were hopeful that we'd see the water white paper and the warm homes plan. We were right, they both came out.
Yes.
On consecutive days, helpfully from government. Thanks for that. And where should we start? Well,
if we're talking about gas, perhaps we should talk about the Warmer Homes Plan, which didn't really talk much about gas, and that's kind of been one of the big takeaways from that document, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think was it one mention of hydrogen, barely anything on biomethane. And then the big one, which has, I guess, caused the most angst amongst the sector, is the total rejection of hybrid heating models. Which had been campaigned for quite a bit. It was at the Labour Party conference. It was a lot. That was back in September. There was a lot of optimism that there would be some movement on hybrid heating systems, to the point where those calling for it were expecting it in the Warm Homes Plan. So I'm getting my publications mixed up there. So that was quite surprising that there was nothing in it. I don't know whether there's been a backtrack on that in the months since, and maybe that's partly what the delay's been.
I think that's a big part of it. There were definitely discussions at quite a high level about this, because you're right. It was seen some time ago, several years ago, as a really viable direction to go down. Then it kind of fell out of favour, but I think because of the direction of travel that was obvious from the heat pump rollout, which I'm sure we'll come on to talk about, it was starting to be considered again. And as you say, there seemed to be a lot of optimism that this was a route that was going to be explored. I think it was an area where even the people who were fully in support of electrification certainly weren't opposed to this idea. It was seen as something that was quite pragmatic, and that's kind of the point that's made in David Blackman, our policy correspondent's feature in the Digital Weekly, where he kind of contrasts the approach in the Netherlands, where they have been more cautious, and they have put a lot of money and resources behind hybrid heat pumps, whereas in the UK we are going full electrification. It seems to be the only game in town, really.
I guess the argument from government would be that hybrid heating perhaps muddies the message a little bit. You know,
If there was a message to muddy, yeah. But I'm not sure there really
well,
is. I mean,
the message is heat pumps are the future, right? That's what, or future of heating. That's the message from government. That's what they're trying to tell the public, right? If you say, yes, you can have a heat pump, but well, you can have the backup option of having this hybrid system, which means you still, you know, it does muddy the message that they're trying to convey. Whether they're conveying it well enough is another story, really.
Yeah, and hopefully this is the start of that, because it doesn't really seem like there has been any kind of particularly joined up strategy or particularly warm narrative from government around heat pumps, other than the targets. And obviously the warm home plan does go some way towards that. But I don't really see why you couldn't still have a message that heat pumps are the future, but as a transition to get there, we're going to look at hybrids. I mean, there are other reasons why hybrid systems are more complicated. So there's certainly things to consider. But I am quite surprised at the complete rejection of it in the warm homes plan.
Yeah. It is at odds to other things in the warm homes plan, right? Like you mentioned the targets there, they've obviously been scaled back. I think it's from, what was it originally, 600,000 per year by 2028, and now it's been both rolled back and the date's been pushed out, right? So I think it's 450,000 by 2030. Is that right? I think.
Yep.
Don't quote me on those, but I think those are right. Yeah. And that does feel like a pragmatic step that they've taken by doing that.
Yeah.
So on one hand, they're being more pragmatic, and on the other, they're,
I don't think they had any choice with the heat pump rollout figures there, because there was absolutely no way. I don't have to hand what the current rollout is, but I think it's much closer to 60,000 than it is to 600,000. Even 450,000 is going to be a real challenge. If you take out new developments, you're still talking about a huge chunk that's going to have to be retrofitted, and the cost, the faff factor, the lack of education among the broad public as to what heat pumps are, why they should adopt them, and the fact that one of the things that we're going to have to really get over, particularly with retrofits, is that heating is a distress purchase. You buy a new heating system when your current one breaks, unless you are somebody who is really into a sustainable lifestyle or has a lot of money, or really wants to invest in future-proofing their homes. I'm sure we'd all like to be in that situation, but for most of us, we have a gas boiler, and when it breaks, we're going to look for a quick replacement to that, especially if it happens in the winter. The time frames for heat pumps, the cost and the hoops you have to go through, just aren't there. So this has got to be. It's got to be beyond targets, and it's got to be beyond just subsidies. It's got to be, I think, government driving improvements in the supply chain and in the process for getting heat pumps fitted. It's not just about money. It's about that faff factor is a huge impact.
Definitely. And the hydrogen factor, which we haven't really talked about either, which I was surprised the hydrogen for heat decision didn't come alongside.
Yeah, I mean, what are we waiting for?
It's 2026 now, right? I understood. Yeah. They always said the decision needs to be taken in 2026, and they were tied to that. That's why we were going to get the warm homes plan first.
Yep.
Last October, I think it was originally slated for, wasn't it? But if I just don't know what the delay is and why we're,
because they don't seem to have left themselves much to talk about. Clearly, hydrogen for domestic heating anyway is not in the government's thinking, so why don't they just come out and say that? Obviously, there is much more of an argument around industrial clusters and for industrial purposes. So that, I guess, is the conversation that's still going on in government. But it seems strange to me that the industry isn't kind of being put out of its misery with that announcements coming. I think the gas networks have kind of moved on from that anyway, and are talking more about biomethane now rather than hydrogen in many cases.
But it is for the public as well. Like when I speak to friends who are not involved in covering the energy sector at all, they do still see this heat pump versus hydrogen thing as a genuine conversation, because there hasn't been a clear ruling out of it. So if they want to unmuddy their message as such, that would be an easy step to do it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And speaking of muddy messages, should we move on to the water white paper?
Why not?
See what I did there?
Very good.
What did you make of it?
It was, well, I think like the Warm Homes Plan. I think this was one that came with a lot of warm words when it came, or in fact even before it came out. A lot of people welcoming it. I think, like a lot of other people, was quite pleasantly surprised, actually. There was more in it than I anticipated there would be. But I think as you read more, not that there's that much to read. I mean, it's 50-odd pages. And very nicely designed, lots of big pictures in there. So it isn't a huge word count. It doesn't take a lot of time to get through. The more you look at it, though, the more you see actually there's a lot more questions than there are answers in here. But given I was expecting it to be a really light document. That was it was a surprise to see how much was in there. That seemed to generally be the reaction of people at the wastewater conference this week. I think generally they are quite positive about the direction of travel here. The fact that the government hasn't really ruled out any of the Independent Water Commission's 88 recommendations. There are some that have more detail than others, and some that aren't really mentioned, but there isn't anything explicitly ruled out in there, which is that's supported by the industry. But what's next, really? That's what's not clear. It's not clear when we're really going to get this new regulator, and it's called a new vision for water, but there's not much of a new vision for this new regulator in there.
Yeah, well, it's all on the transition plan now, isn't it? I mean, it's going to have to do, or the government are going to have to do a lot of work on that transition plan. And from what we've been told is that a lot of what was in the transition plan had to be pulled forward and put in the white paper to flesh it out, because that's part of the reason why it was delayed at the back end of last year, because it was so thin to begin with that. The latest sort of theory I've heard is that Number 10 got involved and said, "This is too thin. You need to flesh it out a little bit." So they sort of dipped into the transition plan and pulled some of that into the white paper, which
absolutely, I mean, you can see that with the chief engineer thing, which is one of those. It was quite strange that that was the sort of news line that was pulled out of the white paper. That was before it was actually published.
Yeah, the night before. That's an interesting point, actually, because that does seem to be what's happening. That happened with the Warm Homes Plan as well. The government now have this strategy of doing like a 10:30 pre-announcement the night before. Yeah, which sort of seems to have worked in both occasions, where the national news outlets have then failed to cover the actual documents once they're out.
Worked from the government's point of view, of avoiding proper scrutiny of the documents. Although having said that, as I say,
not from us,
an enormous amount to scrutinise anyway. And yes, what there is there, we've picked through. But yes, I think the tidbits that were going to be in the transition plan, all loaded into the white paper. And this chief engineer example, a lot of people talking about that this week, saying, is that really that significant? Was that something that you
Yeah.
really need to shout about? I mean, there used to be a chief engineer at Ofwat up until about 10 years ago. That was
Mm.
it was a role that was
And wider than that, local councils as well. We
yeah, yeah, yeah,
don't have
yeah,
them anymore, which is another question.
yeah.
Should that be reintroduced if the government's backing it for
Absolutely,
Ofwat?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And what does it mean? What does a chief engineer mean? What are they going to be doing exactly? So yeah, so an
I want to know how
odd
much they're
one
going to
to
pay
join.
them. So engineers aren't cheap to employ. So if you're going to get someone
No.
senior, I mean, and is it a permanent position? Is it a couple of day a week? Is it like a chairmanship kind of position? Or
Yeah.
be interesting.
Payment, big issue. That's another one that that's something that really isn't addressed in the white paper, the new vision for water. It's talking about the supervisory regulation, the overarching powers that this regulator is going to have, all the things that this regulator is going to do, and how much is this going to cost?
Mm.
Because they've already said that they're going to be paying the regulators more. They're going to be taking it out of civil service pay bands. The
Have they
EA
confirmed that? They've
employees.
confirmed that, have they? Or was that a recommendation?
No, that's true. That was a recommendation from.
I don't think they've
from
responded
Cunliffe.
to that one. I don't know.
That's
Maybe they
true.
have. Maybe I'm wrong.
That's not in there. But I think if that's something that Cunliffe has recommended, it's going to be hard for the government not to follow through on that if they want to recruit the right people. But that is going to push up the costs. You've already got a situation where different regulators are paid on different grades. So the EA, they earn less than Ofwat because they're actually within government. They're actually within DEFRA. And supervisory regulation, an end to self-monitoring, all of this stuff is going to require huge teams of people.
Mm.
I think it's one of the conversations we were having at the wastewater conference, and that I was banging on about relentlessly in every session, was the fact that the public just haven't been asked about this. There's been a lot of assumptions based on the anger from campaigners and the general public about pollution in waterways. There's been assumptions, therefore, that there is a particular standard that people want water companies, the water sector, to attain a certain level of quality of waterways across the country, a certain level of resilience of infrastructure across the country. And I'm sure if you asked people, if you had a magic wand, would you have all of this, then they would say yes. But nobody's talked to them about the cost of this. Water bills are going to rocket up if we do all of this stuff. And pretty soon you're going to find them, on par with energy bills. And I don't think people understand that.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important at this stage that sort of conversation should be had.
Yeah. It's not just on the regulatory side either, is it? There's sort of extra burdens being added on the water companies. These MOT style checks in particular, I'm sort of thinking of, which have been called into question by, was it Anglian Water's head of strategic asset planning, Jeff Darch, this week, who said we don't need that. We know our assets already. We don't need to do these extra checks. And there's very little detail on what those MOT style checks, what that actually means, and how cumbersome they are. Heard quite a few good lines from people on that. I think one former policy advisor to the Environment Agency said it likened it to a policy from the thick of it, and sort of said he could imagine them dreaming it up in the back of the cab. And said which is kind of indicative of the document, sort of in a whole, is that it does feel more like PR than fleshed out policy, doesn't it? The entire thing, it's like a lot of headlines, a lot of sound bites almost, but not much beyond that.
But because it's really, really difficult to get to the bottom of this. There's an
it is, but it's 6 months on.
Pandora's box.
It is. You can do more than a 52-page document in 6. I mean, how long did did Cunliffe and the commission have, and they produced what was it, 400, 500 page document, wasn't it?
They did, and went through, famously 50,000, pieces of evidence, submissions. So, yeah, they got through it, and that was a relatively small team of people actually that were pulling together that report. And certainly in terms of the independent water commissioners, lots of them had day jobs as well. I know they were being supported by a team, but yeah, it was a lot of work, and it's got a lot of respect, that report. And it also does, this is one of the things that people have been saying to me recently, is that that report was really robust, and it did actually talk about possible next steps. It did give a bit of a direction of travel. So the government actually had a lot to work with. The white paper was, a much thinner version of what the IWC had come out with. So you're right. After 6 months, there should be
that's
more
a really
in
good
it.
point on the next steps. I think one of them was to do a review of progress after 2 years. So that would be interesting to see whether the government takes that up or not. Short review at the moment. Anyway, we could talk about the white paper all day, but shall we move on? Anything else catching your eye in the last week or so, James?
Yes, I think lots of interesting stories, as always the case on Utility Week. Some interesting stuff going on in the retail market. So an interesting interview that our reporter Wang Mo did with Rich Hughes of EDF this week, where he was talking about the challenge with energy debt, this age old story of the can't pay and the won't pay, and the fact that customers are allowed to self-identify as vulnerable, and whether there should be more checks, more targeted debt relief for the people who really need it. This is something that retailers are more and more being kind of emboldened to say, and I really welcome that, because I think there has been a tendency in the past to perhaps not want to go there, not to think that the trust isn't really there for retailers to say that kind of thing. And I think it's quite right that is called out.
Well, I think the damage done by the PPM scandal, left retailers wary to sort of call this stuff out for a couple of years, whereas now they're probably only feeling, so I totally understand why. I mean, it's a very sensitive thing to come out and say, isn't it? People are lying to get,
which is
support.
Essentially what they're saying. But with the debt pile, continuing to balloon, it's unsustainable, and it's a problem that I'm not saying it's not getting any attention, because of course it is, but I'm quite surprised that this isn't more of a scandal, in national media, because it's huge. It's
kind of accepted, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
It's an accepted norm now that this is the way it is.
Yeah.
That's all we've got time for, I think. If you're listening and you want to read any of the stories that we've flagged on today's episode, check out our latest digital weekly edition, which goes into pretty much everything we've discussed. Until next time, have a good fortnight.